Zebulun, Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command thee, O Spirit. Elon, I, the Tetragrammaton, the Lord God Most High, I do exercise thee, and do powerfully command.
In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abracast. I'm your host, John Towers. We got, we're kind of still looking at the situation that we are in, sort of documenting the end of Western civilization. We're back to it again. We're back to documenting the end of Western civilization. It's happening so fast. So I have my vessel of the art here. Filled with my weapon of mass distraction, my Jin Jihad. It's a formula for a weapon of mass distraction. Well, I guess once you make it, it's not the formula anymore. Something to think about. All right, remember to check out Abracast.com. So let's get into it. We talked... in this little series, I guess, we talked about the American dystopia, and then last week we talked about the coming nuclear holocaust. Just talking about World War. There's a lot of World War III stuff that happened this week, actually, but this week we're actually going to be talking about the long, cold winter that's coming. And we're going to start right here. JustTheNews.com. Biden's energy policy costing the U.S. economy $100 billion a year. A new analysis finds the U.S. would be producing significantly more oil and natural gas today if Orange Man's policies had continued. There was actually a month or two there when the Orange Man was in office where we were actually net exporting oil. I mean, I guess nobody really knows that. President Biden, senior officials in the administration have repeatedly said this year that the U.S. is near record levels of domestic oil and gas production, according to a new study. However, that's not exactly the case. The analysis by the economists Stephen Moore and Casey Mulligan found that the Biden administration's policies have caused the U.S. to produce, guess what, significantly less oil and gas. That's what happens when you stop pumping and you stop leasing land to gas companies. I mean, during Biden's presidency, that it would have during a second term for former President Orange Man to the detriment of the national economy and to the detriment of the world, as we're about to see. The U.S. would be producing between 2 and 3 million more barrels of oil a day and between 20 and 25 more billion cubic feet of natural gas under Orange Man's policies. states the report, which was published by the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. This translates into an economic loss or tax on the American economy of roughly $100 billion a year. The figures are based on production numbers adjusted for energy price spikes that have occurred since Biden entered office in 2021. Both the domestic and international evidence shows that when we adjust for the higher international price for oil and gas, the U.S. is drilling, not recording amounts of oil and gas, but far below what market conditions would dictate. Moore and Mulligan argue it takes a higher oil price to motivate the same supply during the Biden administration. New report comes out 2 days before the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, that's OPEC. It's we're going to hear a lot about OPEC here in a little bit. Is in its non-member allies, a coalition known as OPEC Plus. So the plus just means Russia. It's an organization of petroleum exporting countries plus Russia, led by Russia and Saudi Arabia, announced Wednesday that they were going to slash oil production by 2 million barrels a day, a move that could push up already high global energy prices. So it's not mentioning why they're going to do this or why they're doing this, but we know why. We're going to get to it here in a little bit. The White House, which has been desperately lobbying OPEC Plus members to vote against the proposed production cut, decried the decision. The president is disappointed by the short-sighted decision of OPEC Plus to cut production quotas while the global economy is dealing with a continued negative impact of Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. White House officials said in a statement that, first of all, is... the president is disappointed by short-sighted decision. Pot, kettle, black. Experts say OPEC Plus has increased sway in part because of Biden's policies have limited U.S. domestic energy production. As frustrating as someone who worked with the Orange Man administration on energy policy, Moore told Just the News, we broke the back of OPEC under Trump because the U.S. was the leading energy power. You can't have a cartel without the world's number one producer. Under Trump in 2019, the U.S. achieved energy independence, becoming for the first time a net energy exporter of oil, gas, and coal. In November of that year, the U.S. oil and gas industry reached the peak production at the record of 13 million barrels of oil a day, according to the Department of Energy's Information Administration. By comparison, U.S. oil production was roughly 11.6 million barrels in April of 2022. That's the latest data available, according to this. Production has likely risen up a bit since then. In raw numbers, production is down 1 to 1.5 million barrels today from Orange Man peak. According to Moore and Mulligan's estimates, that equates to somewhere between 100 million to 150 million a day in lost revenue for the U.S. oil industry, using this average price this year of roughly $100 a barrel. But today's oil prices are much higher than the price when Trump was president. During Trump's presidency, the average world price was $54 a barrel, adjusted for 2019 inflation figures. God damn it. Under Biden, the average was $71 a day through April 2022 and averaged $86 just in 2022. This calculation that the U.S. would produce 2 to 3 million more barrels of oil a day comes from estimating what would happen if the Trump supply conditions had remained in place after January 2021 when he left office, while accounting for this price spike since then. Biden is playing right into OPEC's hands, allowing this cartel to dominate the oil market in ways it couldn't under Trump. This is what cartels do. This is why they're there, why they do it. Regarding natural gas production today is near its peak of 3 billion cubic feet under Trump. However, throughout most of Trump's presidency, the price of natural gas ranged from $3 to $4 per thousand cubic feet. This year, by comparison, the price has ranged from $6 to $8 per thousand cubic feet. In other words, prices have doubled, but U.S. production has been basically flat, stated the report, which estimated Trump-era production under Biden-era prices would translate to about 23 billion more daily cubic feet of natural gas. Taken together, the oil and the natural gas figures would mean about 100 billion a year more in the U.S. GDP as long as the Trump policies could have continued. According to Moore and Mulligan, they also noted the higher production would likely bring down energy prices, resulting in a win-win for America. Biden had blamed the oil and gas industry for higher energy prices and lower energy supply, noting that companies have been raking in higher profits and calling on them to work with his administration to bring the energy costs down. At a time of war, historically high refinery profit margins being passed directly onto the American families are not acceptable, Biden wrote to oil executives this summer. Companies must take immediate action to increase the supply of gasoline, diesel, and other refined products. Is it possible that he doesn't know what's going on? I mean, I guess he doesn't know what's going on. Whoever is in charge is just making him look like an idiot. Whoever is in charge of Biden is making him look like a dipstick. However, critics argue the real problem is Biden is creating a hostile environment for the industry. Moore and Mulligan cited historically high inflation and a failure to maintain an investment-friendly business tax code as two forces hitting the oil and gas industry, especially hard because it relies so much on capital. They also argue this issue is being exacerbated by the Biden administration's energy policy, which aimed to transition away from fossil fuels to green renewable energy. The administration has announced a whole of government approach to climate policy, which includes trying to drive financing and investment away from the oil and gas industry. We're in what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's some kind of infinite loop. Part of that effort had included Biden's special envoy for climate, John Kerry, who has been pressuring banks and financial institutions not to make loans to U.S. oil and gas companies and to embrace the commitment to a future economy of zero carbon emissions. Such an environment incentivizes investing in significant oil and gas productions, according to experts. It might cost the company $5 billion to develop a large new refining facility, which will only pay for itself after 20 years. Morrison, who's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, recently told Just the News. Why would any corporate board greenlight such an investment when the White House is planning on a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035 and the net zero emissions economy by no later than 2050. The U.S. also doesn't have the necessary energy infrastructure to increase the production where it needs to be, according to Moore, who cited Biden canceling pipelines, restricting drilling on federal lands, and imposing various regulations that raise the price of drilling. Despite Biden's letter to oil companies this summer, refineries cannot just ramp up output, with the U.S. refiners already utilizing over 90% of their current capacity in an effort to meet the demand, right? Neither the White House nor the Energy Department responded to requests for comments for the story as gas prices reached the record levels earlier this year amid a global supply shortage intensified by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Biden attempted to make up for a lack of supply by listen to this. Biden attempted to make up for a lack of supply by continuously tapping into the country's strategic petroleum reserve, which is now at its lowest level of emergency oil reserves since 1984. So this guy is out there and he's like, look, man, we're probably going to go to war. He's out there picking a fight with the Middle East again. He's picking a fight with Russia. I'm probably forgetting somebody. He's out there picking fights, and he's draining the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is there for like war stuff. It's there to like run tanks and airplanes and shit. And he keeps tapping it, which is actually why the price of gas decreased here for a month or two. It's going back up now, but it dropped significantly, and that's because of this tapping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. But she's going back up, and we're out of oil, bro. We're at our lowest level of emergency oil reserve since 1984. The United States would not have had to sell a single barrel of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve if bad man's drilling policy had remained in place, wrote Moore and Mulligan. They calculated the amount of domestic oil production lost under Biden is about 4 times greater, which is 600 million barrels than the amount. And it's only been like 2 years. Then the amount of oil extracted, 150 million barrels through July 2022 from the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. In other words, the U.S. would have produced much more oil than what it had to deplete from the National Reserves, a fact that Moore argues has resulted in Biden giving more power to OPEC and Russia. The only result of Biden's war on oil and gas is a war on the American energy, not energy in these other countries, some of which are our enemies. So let's see what he did. When a couple weeks ago, last week maybe, Biden tried to deceive us with naked political plea to the Saudis. This is on Red State, October 11th, 2022. He goes to Saudi Arabia, and he's like fist bumping these guys that are wearing drapes. He's like fist bumping them because he's so hip. Because he's from the streets, man. Unit. As we previously reported, OPEC Plus made the decision to cut 2 million barrels of oil a day in production despite the White House's plea to produce more. That caused the White House to spasm and panic. But now there's more about the White House's reaction that is very troubling. According to the Wall Street Journal, citing people familiar with the talks when the Biden administration found out that the cuts might be coming, they reached out to Saudi Arabia and urged them to pressure OPEC Plus to delay the cuts for another month. What's happening in a month? What could be? Why could they be begging for them to wait a month? Until November, just a few days before the midterm elections, so it wouldn't impact them. That way Americans wouldn't feel affected, the effect of the cuts until after the election. It was a full court press. The White House officials called the Saudi leader, Mohammed bin Salman, and even Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen spoke to the finance minister. The Biden team had done a lot of things to try to deceive us, but it's hard to get much more nakedly political than that. And then when he's asked about it on TV, he's like, no, we didn't even talk about oil. Oil? What, bitch? Are you cooking something? Bam! There's two Chappelle references in under 10 minutes. Oil? According to the report, the Biden team even threatened the Saudis, saying that if they didn't get a delay from OPEC Plus, they would view it as they were siding with Russia and it would damage the relationship we have with them. Quid pro quo. I heard someone got in trouble for something like this a few years ago. I can't really remember what that was, though. The Saudis told the Biden team no because they said the Biden team was trying to influence the election. It wasn't about the oil situation. And then they went and leaned on OPEC Plus to cut production. The Saudis also said that they have to look out for their economy if the price of a barrel goes too low. Adrian Watson of the National Security Council now denies that they wanted a delay for political reasons. It was categorically false to connect this to the U.S. elections, Ms. Watson said. It's about the impact and the short-sighted decisions of the global economy. You could see that the Biden team and the Democrats then follow through with their threat that the Biden team allegedly made about reevaluating their relationship with the Saudis. We saw the White House coordinator for strategic communications at the National Security Council, John Kirby, saying this. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat, Connecticut, and Senator Bob Mendez, Democrat, New Jersey, both were also pushing to reevaluate their relationship and put anything with Saudi Arabia on hold. Quid pro Joe. The U.S. Or the Wall Street Journal report also showed how much Biden has hurt the relationship with the Saudis. He ostensibly went to Saudi Arabia in July to help repair the relationship and beg for oil. Then he had called the country a pariah because of the murder of Khashoggi, but instead of improving things, according to the Saudis, he made things worse. If anything, said the people inside the Saudi government, the visit angered Prince Mohammed, who is upset that Mr. Biden went public with his private comments to the Saudi royal over Mr. Khashoggi's death, which prompted Saudi officials to publicly contradict Mr. Biden's characterization of the interaction. In August, the Saudis planned to push OPEC Plus to raise oil production by 500,000 barrels a day in an effort to please Mr. Biden, but Prince Mohammed ordered the increase lowered to a token 100,000 barrels a day after the Biden visit, the people inside the Saudi government said. The U.S. State Department's energy security envoy, Amos Hochstein, sent the Saudi energy minister, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, an email that suggested he had broken his word, promising to larger increase. People familiar with the matter said the email angered Prince Abdulaziz and strengthened his resolve to forge an oil policy independent of the U.S. people. In September, Prince Abdulaziz engineered OPEC Plus's first production cut since the pandemic, erasing the 100,000 barrels a day increase from August. Then before the October 5th OPEC Plus meeting, Prince Abdulaziz called the Persian Gulf oil chiefs and urged them to cut back a bigger cut, OPEC Plus delegate said. So the Saudis started getting unhappy with Biden because of his calling them a pariah and then wanting to make a deal with Iran, their enemy. So the Saudis and Iran are mortal enemies right now at this point. And so not only did Biden go and call the Saudis a pariah, then he's trying to cut this deal with Iran, who is their enemy, and then he made it even worse. On top of that, the Biden team wanted to use the Saudis to deceive us. The Saudis wouldn't play. So if you're looking at this, there's a white hat and a black hat. There's a good guy and a bad guy in this story. And our guy is not the good guy. Our guy is not the good guy. I've mentioned when we do these episodes that we've lost our way. We've lost the moral high ground. We've lost the ethical, whatever ethics that we had. It's all just flushed. Like we're the bad guys now. Dun 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 dun. It's completely believable that they were concerned about their interests, and it wasn't about siding with Russia. But now the Biden team is doing everything to push them away and jeopardize our interests in the region, all because and that's not to say I want to just put the brakes on and say that's not to say that they aren't bad guys too. Here in the West, in America, we're used to looking at good guys and bad guys instead of shades of gray. We're all shades of gray. But in this situation, we're grayer than they are. What a mess. This is what happens when you have stupid people in charge of the government who are only interested in their power. None of this would even be happening if the Biden team hadn't jeopardized our domestic oil production. So do you see the theme? This is the Washington Examiner. Biden warns of consequences for Saudi Arabia after the OPEC plus oil production cut. President Joe plugs Biden vowed to hold Saudi Arabia accountable after OPEC plus decision to push up oil prices by cutting its production quotas amid Russian war in Ukraine. I'm not going to get into what I consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences, Joe Biden said Tuesday. And he probably said, no joke. Come on, man. Popcorn was a bad dude. I also heard that they caught him sniffing another girl when he was in Florida for the hurricane stuff. How weird is it for a grown man to sniff girls? It's so bizarre. And it's just like, and no one ever says like, hey man, stop fucking sniffing my daughter, bro. Anyhow. Biden's comments made to CNN during his third televised interview of the year come after the White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told the network the president believed the United States needed to reevaluate its relationship with the kingdom after the Saudi-led oil cartel announced its decision last week. Europe is already bracing for an energy crisis, given the continent's dependence on Russian oil and natural gas. During the foreign policy heavy sit-down, Biden insisted that he had no intention of meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the G20 summit next month in Indonesia. But that position could change if he wanted to talk about the detained Americans. For Biden, his Armageddon comment, like in the Russian-Ukraine war to 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, was directed to Putin because he cannot continue with impunity to talk about the use of tactical nuclear weapons, as if that's a rational thing to do. Unquote. The president acknowledged there had been decisions within his administration about red lines in the war, but declined to make them public. Well, that's like the first thing he's kept to himself. He's usually out there going, well, I'm not going to do anything to you if you just don't do this. In a preview clip, Biden also added he considered Putin a rational actor, revealing himself not to be a subscriber of the so-called madman theory many people have used to describe the strong man. I think he is a rational actor who miscalculated significantly. Biden said, I think he thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms, and this was the home of Mother Russia in Kiev. I mean, historically, if you look at Biden's track record, going back to the fucking 70s since he's been in office, historically, he is on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision. Just name one. He's on the wrong side of it. He's not very good on domestic issues either. Biden taped the interview after the group of 7 leaders had an emergency meeting about Russia and Ukraine earlier on Tuesday. So, next. This is actually CNBC. OPEC Plus to cut oil production by 2 million barrels per day to shore up prices, defying U.S. pressure. So this is going to have a lot of just redundant stuff, but I'm going to get through a little of it. A group of some of the world's most powerful oil producers on Wednesday agreed to impose deep output cuts, seeking to spur a recovery in crude prices despite calls from the U.S. to pump more to help the global economy. And I'm betting that the CNBC article is not going to talk about how they were like, oh, well, if you are going to cut it, can you at least wait until after the election? OPEC and non-OPEC allies, a group often referred to as OPEC Plus, decided at their first face-to-face gathering in Vienna since 2020 to reduce production by 2 million barrels per day from November. Energy market participants had expected OPEC Plus, which includes Saudi Arabia and Russia, to impose output cuts of somewhere between 500,000 barrels and 2 million barrels. The move represents a major reversal in production policy for the alliance, which slashed output by a record 10 million barrels per day in early 2020 when demand plummeted due to the vid pandemic. The oil cartel has since gradually unwound those record cuts, albeit with several OPEC Plus countries struggling to fulfill their quotas. Oil prices have fallen roughly $80 a barrel from more than $120 in earlier June amid growing fears about the prospect of the global economic recession. And that, again, has to do with strategic oil reserve, the raping of the strategic oil reserve. The production cut for November is an attempt to reverse the slide, despite repeated pressure from U.S. President Joe Biden's administration for the group to pump more and lower fuel prices ahead of the midterm elections next month. The international benchmark Brent crude future traded at $92.82 a barrel during Wednesday afternoon's deal in London, up around 1.1%. The U.S. West Texas Intermediate futures, meanwhile, stood at $87.37, almost 1% higher. OPEC Plus will hold its next meeting on December 4th. Okay, the White House was disappointed. The White House said in a statement that Biden was disappointed by the short-sighted decision by OPEC to cut production quotas while the global economy is dealing with the continued negative impact of Putin's invasion of the Ukraine. It said that my brain hurts. It said that Biden had directed the Department of Energy to release another 10 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve next month. In light of today's action, the Biden administration will also consult with Congress on additional tools and authorities to reduce OPEC's control over the energy prices, like drill our own fucking oil, light bulb, bling. Hey, I have an idea. The statement added that the OPEC Plus announcement served as a reminder of why it's critical that the U.S. reduces its reliance on foreign sources of fossil fuel. To be sure, the burning of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas is the chief driver of the climate emergency. Speaking at a news conference, OPEC Secretary General Hathim Al-Ghayas defended the group's decision to impose deep output cuts, saying OPEC Plus was seeking to provide security and stability to the energy markets. Asked by CNBC's Hadley Gamble whether the alliance was doing so at a price, Al-Ghayas replied, "Everything has a price. Energy security has a price as well." Selfishly motivated energy analysts said the actual impact of the group's supply cuts for November is likely to be limited, with a unilateral reduction by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Kuwait, and likely to do the main job. What's more, analysts said the current difficulty for OPEC Plus to form a view more than a month or two into the future, as the energy market faces the uncertainty of more European sanctions from a non-OPEC producer, Russia, including on shipping, insurance, gas caps, reduced petroleum imports. In its own words, OPEC's mission is to ensure the adequate pricing environment for both consumers and producers, yet the decision to reduce output in the current environment runs counter to this objective. Stephen Brennock, a senior analyst at PVM Oil Associates in London, said in a research note. Blah, 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 blah. We're going to get through with this one. Okay, here we go. So the thing that we have to know at this point in our story is one of the consequences that Biden has leveled to Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries in the Middle East is that he's pulling out of this. Oh God, I don't have it here in front of me. There was this meeting that was scheduled for the Middle East, and it was a Middle East security meeting or something. It was about what to do about Iran. So Biden is pulling out of this meeting, and he's sided with Iran. He's called Saudi Arabia a pariah. He's destroyed. He's crushed the ally. He's crushed our relationship with the allies that we had in the Middle East, that we've had historically. He's just destroyed it all. He's crushed it. And not only has he crushed it, but he drove them into an agreement with Russia, hence the OPEC Plus now. He's this guy. He's just a disaster. So Biden did an interview, and they asked him, and he was like, "No, we didn't even talk about oil. I wasn't there to talk about oil at all. Whatever." Even though that's counterintuitive, because he also said, "Well, there's going to be consequences for them doing this," and blah blah blah. Anyhow, he's been running his mouth about this and lying about what had happened. And this thing came out about him asking them to wait to do the cuts until after the election. Anyhow, he's been talking so much shit about this that Saudi Arabia releases a lengthy statement saying Biden asked for a delay in oil production to cut to November. So shots fired. These guys, they released a statement in English basically saying like, no, you're not getting the whole. I'll just read this. Hold on. Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia said Thursday that the U.S. had urged the kingdom to postpone a decision by OPEC and its allies, including Russia, to cut oil production by a month. Such a delay would have helped reduce the risk of a spike in gas prices ahead of the U.S. midterm elections next month. A statement issued by the Saudi Foreign Ministry didn't specifically mention the November 8th elections, in which U.S. President Joe Biden is trying to maintain his narrow Democratic majority in Congress, which isn't going to happen. However, it stated that the U.S. suggested the cuts be delayed by a month. In the end, OPEC announced its cuts at its October 5th meeting in Vienna. Holding off on cuts would have meant implementing them just before the November 8th election, at that time when they likely couldn't drastically influence prices at the pump. Rising oil prices, by extension higher gasoline prices, have been a key driver of the inflation in the U.S. and around the world, worsening global economic woes as Russia's month-long war on Ukraine also has disrupted global food supplies. For Biden, gasoline prices creeping up could affect voters. And he and many lawmakers have warned that America's longtime security-based relationship with the kingdom could be reconsidered. Again, we've had agreements with Saudi Arabia. The White House has rejected any attempts to link the OPEC request to the elections, but Saudi Arabia issuing a rare, lengthy statement shows just how tense relations are between our two countries. Ties have been fraught since the 2018 killing and dismemberment of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, which Washington believes came on the orders of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Meanwhile, behind the facade of this innocent-looking bookstore, higher energy prices provide a weapon Russia can use against the West, which has been arming and supplying Ukraine. It's all connected. It's a nightmare. What? The statement by Saudi Foreign Ministry, acknowledged that the kingdom had been talking to the U.S. about postponing OPEC Plus's 2 million barrel cut announced last week. The government of The kingdom clarified, though, its continuous consultation with the U.S. administration that all economic analyses indicate that postponing the OPEC Plus's decision for a month, according to what has been suggested, would have had negative economic consequences. The ministry said in its statement. The ministry statement confirmed the Wall Street Journal's article this week that also said the U.S. sought to delay OPEC Plus's production cut until just before the midterm elections. The journal quoted unnamed Saudi officials as describing the move as a political gambit by Biden ahead of the vote. The kingdom also criticized attempts to link the kingdom's decision to Russian war on Ukraine. The kingdom stresses that while it strives to preserve the strength of its relations with all friendly countries, it affirms the rejection of any dictates, actions, or efforts to distort its noble objectives to protect the global economy from oil market volatility. It said resolving economic challenges require the establishment of a non-politicized constructive dialogue and to wisely and rationally consider what serves the interest of all countries. Both Saudi Arabia and the neighboring United Arab Emirates, key producers in OPEC, voted in favor of the United Nations General Assembly resolution Wednesday to condemn Russia's attempted illegal annexation of 4 Ukrainian regions and demanded its immediate reversal. Once muscular enough to grind the U.S. to a halt with its 1970s oil embargo, OPEC needed non-members like Russia to push through production cuts in 2016 after prices crashed below $30 a barrel. And amid a rising American production, the 2016 agreement gave birth to the so-called OPEC Plus, which joined the cartel in cutting production to help stimulate prices. The vid pandemic briefly saw oil prices go to negative territory before air travel and economic activity rebounded following lockdowns around the world. Benchmark Brent crude sat over $92 a barrel. We've already said this one. Biden, who famously called Saudi Arabia a quote pariah unquote during his 2020 election campaign, traveled to the kingdom in July and fist bumped Prince Mohammed before a meeting. I'm from the streets, man. Despite outreach, it's like when you see. I shouldn't even say this because I do this. I'm an old person and I wear baseball hats backwards occasionally. But I remember when I was a younger man, seeing old dudes wear baseball caps backwards. I'm like, bro, come on, man, just turn that fucking thing around already. Anyhow, despite the outreach. The kingdom has been supportive of keeping oil prices high in order to fund Prince Mohammed's aspirations, including his planned $500 billion futuristic desert city project called Neom. On Tuesday, Biden warned of repercussions for Saudi Arabia over the OPEC Plus decision. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia, Biden said. I'm not going to get into what I consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences. No joke. Come on, man, there will be consequences. Okay, well, here's another one. Biden delays military meetings with Middle East allies amid escalating Iranian threats. This is the Washington Free Beacon. The picture accompanying this article is just another dude wearing drapes on his head. The Biden administration is postponing a series of military meetings with allies in the Middle East, stoking concerns in Congress that the United States is shying away from confronting Iran's regional terrorism network. So we're siding with Iran and destroying the relationships we've had, the time-tested relationships that we've had with our allies there in the Middle East. The United States Gulf Cooperation Council Working Group, regional alliance that includes Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern allies, was scheduled to meet on October 17th about improving integrated air and missile defense systems, which have served as a key line of defense for allies against Iranian attacks. The White House National Security Council, however, has decided to delay the meetings amid the standoff between Joe Plugs Biden and Saudi Arabia over oil production. The cancellation of these security meetings is believed to be the punishment for reduced oil output by the Saudis and OPEC, the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. Senator Joni Ernst, a member of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, wrote to the White House on Wednesday warning it that delaying these security meetings will embolden Iran's terrorism enterprise and set back years of security progress with the United States' Middle Eastern allies. Integrated air defenses in the region have served as a primary bulwark against Iranian terror attacks, which have targeted Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other U.S. allies. Delaying this meeting amid the strengthening of the infrastructure will also impact Israel, which has begun to work on security issues with its former Arab foes since the Abraham Accords. These were the peace agreements that were inked during Orange Man's administration. Listen to that sentence. It's amazing. Israel has begun working with its former enemies. Oh my God. Disrupting this momentum delays partner capacity building, worsens regional security, and aids our adversaries, Ernst wrote. It also damages trust by conditioning regional securities on the resolution of border policies and emergency disputes, a poor precedent. As a security partner of choice, the United States would reliably implement defense efforts and proceed with the U.S. Gulf Coordination Council Integrated Air and Missile Defense Working Group without delay. The Biden administration is also sending a message to Iran that its attacks on U.S. allies will not be met with force. The delay of these meetings also comes as Iran prepares to hold a series of war drills along its northern border. Iran and its armed proxies continue to project malign influence throughout the Middle East, actions that threaten U.S. partners and continue to pose risks to the American homeland, Ernst wrote. Tehran has been responsible for hundreds of attacks against Gulf partners since 2015. Iran's ability to strike civilian targets and to wreak havoc in the region, Freudian slip, to wreak havoc in the region and beyond continues to grow as well, according to the senator. Tehran's Air Force recently inked a deal with Russia to buy advanced fighter jets, the largest military purchase of this nature in the region in 30 years. After the deal was announced, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps unveiled an advanced patrol combat vehicle armed with the vertical launch missiles, extending its operational reach. It is these types of advancements that the Gulf Security Alliance is meant to combat. The United States, Ernst told the White House, must continue to convene partners, reinforce security dialogue, and develop defense concepts to counter these growing threats. Or not. I mean, apparently our new stance is... This has been the Abracast, and I've been John Towers. Deflated, word of the day, defeated. This is just mind-boggling to me. I'll talk to you guys in a few days.
Thank you for listening, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please send an email or find us on social media and let us know what you think about the show. We would appreciate it if you would give us a 5-star rate and review wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find Stigmata Studios, graphic, novels, and comic books at Abracast.com. Welcome to the Red Archive. Get access to over 50 hours of archived episodes, more bonus audio, additional exclusive content, All this for only $1 a month. Find the link to the Red Archive at Abracast.com.